What up, what up, what up, you guys? I want to welcome everybody to Raw Topic. Today, we about to get raw on Wauwatosa Police Department. I've got some journalists in the house today that is ready to talk and just give you guys the juice. We got Kevin Gowicki. You already know him from Never Stop Media.
What up? What up?
Yeah. We got Isaiah Holmes from the Wisconsin, what is it?
Examiner.
Examiner.
What's going on, guys?
What's up? Uh, so this is new for Isaiah on Raw Topic. So we're really happy he was able to make it today. This was like a last minute thing, and we told him about it. He flew down here. He was ready to go. He was like, "Yes, I'm in." So this is his first time on the show. I want everybody to welcome Isaiah Holmes. He's a journalist.
Yeah.
Are you an investigative journalist?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. And him and Kevin, we're gonna talk about what's going on in Wauwatosa. So I don't know who wants to start this party off, man. What? Where should we even begin with this
Oh,
nonsense? Let's.
listen, I say we let the real journalist lead us off.
Okay.
Isaiah, listen, everybody, you guys got to know this guy. This is my hero. This is who I look up to. He is a real deal when it comes to investigative journalism and exposing things that the people need to know, right? But you
Yeah.
cover a lot of other things, though, too.
Oh yeah. I cover, in addition to police stuff, I cover, environmental stuff, climate change stuff, immigration issues, overdose, and drug use, topics as well, issues like that. I kind of cast a wide net there.
Yeah.
Nice. You guys, can we start with the ghost arrest? Do you
Yeah,
guys know
sure.
anything about that?
Yeah,
I
sure.
seen an article. My girlfriend showed me early this morning about this article about ghost arrest, and I'm like, you know what? Let me. I text Kevin right away because he's always on top of it. And yeah, let's get into ghost arrest in Wauwatosa. What the heck was that about, you guys?
Yeah, I actually wrote that article.
Did you?
Yeah,
Wow, nice.
and essentially what was going on with that, the Wauwatosa Police Department, in January 2020 released a big open records, like a Dropbox link with lots of open records documents to different media and etc. And in those were many reports about, how they had been policing and surveilling and monitoring the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests that had been, coming to, the city of Wauwatosa, uh, throughout the summer of 2020, throughout the fall. And essentially, what the department had been doing, and the issue in these reports was that they were listing people as arrested, who had never been arrested either that day and in some cases, not at all. The highest profile person who was included in that was State Representative David Bowen. He's a Democrat out of Milwaukee who's been in the streets with the people, really since May, since the summer. And what it says, is, it says, there's obviously the report that describes, the incident or whatnot, whatever the officer was responding to, and then at the end of that it says, there's an entry that says, arrested, and then there's a booking number, and then, Bowen, and the interesting thing about that is that David Bowen was not given a ticket, he was not arrested, he was not detained, and that goes for for several other protesters, and there were about 40 protesters in addition to David Bowen, 40, 45 who had been listed as arrested when they hadn't been arrested at all. Some received tickets, some didn't receive a ticket at all, and those entries are completely indistinguishable from entries which actually did list a actual, you know, arrest. So comparing those two entries, you can't tell what involved an actual arrest and what is a what we call a ghost arrest. An arrest isn't there, and Tosa PD essentially said that that was a result of their, internal system, how they make these reports, how they refer a ticket or a case to the district attorney for review, and it doesn't. And they basically downplayed it the major concern was like, does this information saying that XYZ was arrested when they weren't, does that show up, say, if you were in a traffic stop or if a cop from another department pulls you over, and when he pulls up your name and your address and your information, will that come up too? And the public information officer at Tosa PD said no, it wouldn't, but obviously the trust that people have in the department has been pretty thoroughly wounded over the last year. So that's what the ghost arrest issue was about.
And that's dangerous though too, not just for individual protesters where, like you said, in a traffic stop, is that something that can come up? But somebody as high profile as David Bowen, where that could affect a re-election later,
Mm-hmm.
that could affect, if he's trying to go into higher elected positions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where if something's listed that he would now have a criminal record for something that never actually happened,
Right.
that could affect him seriously down the road.
Right. And that's just like an internal kind of thing that they were, assigning booking numbers, which I talked to a couple of police officers. I in my story, Ghost Arrests, I talked to Randy Shrewsbury, who's a former Cincinnati area police officer who now runs as the executive director of a institute which focuses on reforming the way people are trained for criminal justice. It's literally called the Institute for Criminal Justice Training Reform. And, he said, like, he's never seen anything like that. Like, when you put a booking number on someone, that person has been arrested or there may be a couple other technical things which may ascribe a booking number, but not for what they were doing in Wauwatosa,
Right.
where the people sometimes didn't even receive a ticket. It's just one of those, and that was once again a more of an internal issue. That's not the more kind of overt things that were going on with the protesters and some of the other things that we found out over the past several months.
Yeah, which we're definitely getting into. But even with the ghost arrest tickets, like they're still being charged a fee, right? That what was it, like $1,321 or whatever?
Yeah, they varied. Generally, and mind you, these tickets were before the October curfew. So these were given out in August. These were given out in September. David Bowen's specific ghost arrest entry was for September 17th. Mm-hmm. So these tickets were once again like you said, these kinds of $1,300 tickets, which they were. It seems that when you read the reports, what the police were doing were they were recording their dash videos. So they were going through their dash videos and also going through social media videos. Maybe they were public videos. Maybe there was some sort of deeper investigative strategy that the police were doing to acquire these social media videos, but they were taking these videos and they were identifying people through these videos and then mailing them their tickets, usually gathering more information about them from the Department of Transportation to give them their ticket. And one interesting thing, once again, with this idea of the internal system, back in August, some of those tickets, those $1,300 tickets that were given out, they said providing false information to an officer. So the ticket was for obstruction or something like that, but it'll also say provided false information to an officer.
To somebody that was never actually encountered
Yes.
of physical law enforcement
Yeah,
personnel.
Yeah,
Right.
so that kind of goes with the same ghost arrest kind of thing where the ticket says something that didn't happen.
Right.
And with the ghost arrest, it's a listing of an arrest that didn't happen. And when I asked the PIO, the public information officer, like, look, how can this be prevented in the future to where you don't get this kind of concern and you have to explain yourself in this way if it is, in fact, what you say it is? It's just an internal thing. It doesn't amount to anything, really. And she said, well, we can redact the information in the future. So it's like the only solution is to hide information instead of reevaluating your system. You're going to just hide information,
Right.
hide the fact that that
Right.
this information is
And
there.
if it is something where they're issuing these arrest tickets, They're putting a dollar amount on it,
Yeah.
right? Claiming that these things happened. We know for a fact they didn't, because how are you obstructing if you were never actually approached, right?
Right.
And then claiming a dollar value to said ticket. Mm-hmm. It's essentially fraud.
And like, how are you providing false information to an officer if you never talked to an officer? If that officer is going back and doing crime analysis to determine who you are, you know, you never talked to that officer, so how can you provide false information? Oh, well, it's just an internal thing. Well, that's confusing. That's a $1,300 ticket. And some of these tickets, when you actually look up the municipal code for what the ticket is cited for, it's in these tickets are in gross excess, money wise excess for what the actual citation is supposed to be. It's not supposed to exceed more than a few $100s, and they're giving out $1,300 tickets.
Right, because Wisconsin statute for like the curfew stuff, it can't exceed more than $200, right?
Yeah, for violating the emergency order, and they were giving out, once again, these very, very lofty tickets.
Right. Who approved the dollar amounts? There was a document that came out.
You know, there was one of these police reports had, I believe it was a police lieutenant who mentioned in the report, and this is one of the first mentions of that specific dollar amount, you know, and ascribing a booking number. You know, it's kind of funny because the dollar amount, I believe it was $1,321 and some change. That was like a dollar or two more than what Kimberly Motley, the civil rights attorney who's been taking on Wauwatosa, her very first batch of open records emails involving Joseph Mensah. There were a bunch of emails involving that particular officer who was at the center of the controversies in Wauwatosa, having been involved in 3 fatal shootings in 5 years. When to get those emails, she had to pay money. She had to pay a lot of money, you know, and it was around that $1,300 amount. So there's this feeling that maybe that's why they picked that particular amount.
Wow.
And in terms of the actual lieutenant, you know, he's a particular lieutenant who's been out in the protests a lot for Wauwatosa, been responsible for that. I shy away from sometimes saying specific kind of ground level officers' names in that context, just because sometimes it's easy to focus on what a particular officer did and not what the systemic issue with the whole department is. And when you're talking about a lieutenant, that's like a mid-level supervisor. He has power and yet he doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's taking his orders from someone else too. And with Tosa PD, sometimes it's hard to track how far up the chain of command some things go, because when things get inconvenient, Chief Barry Weber says, "Well, I didn't know about that," or "I don't." Or
Plausible
"That's not true."
deniability by the chief.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So did we pretty much touch on the reasons for the curfew?
The reason, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, and you correct me if I'm wrong or you have more. So from what I heard, which when they implemented the curfew in Tosa, it was because they were getting what Tosa called credible threats to Mayfair Mall. Now, during some open records requests, searchings by some specific individuals that specifically use that terminology for, you know, credible threats towards Mayfair, it came back that they had no documentation of anything to do with any type of credible threat. There's nothing in emails, notes, bullet points, anything to do with credible threats. So it's, in that context, it would be that Wauwatosa made up this big kind of fabricated lie to the general public that, well, hey, we have to implement this because there's legitimate threats towards this mall. But yet there's no documentation on a single credible threat.
Yeah, and you know that part of it is kind of interesting because, you know, when I first heard about the credible threats part of you know, the credible threats against Mayfair Mall part of the curfew issue, it came out to me as almost like, what is it? Because we knew from the beginning that not only Wauwatosa but law enforcement in general had been monitoring social media, had been surveilling people through social media, and had been kind of you know, it really begged the question of like, were they looking at specific posts that that random trolls, and this is speculative, but like were they looking at random posts that trolls were posting, saying different things, and like what exactly were those credible threats? Were they letters? I suspect that they were more so like social media chatter, by people who may or may not have been serious, like who knows, in it. And in addition to, I do think that it did, the credible threats against Mayfair Mall did create certain, it did make it convenient for them to do certain things, because it did seem like they were kind of operating in some way, not only to defend Mayfair Mall, but physically operating out of Mayfair Mall. Like Mayfair Mall was kind of like a base for them in a way, in addition to the Wauwatosa Police Department. And we should also mention the shooting of Alvin Cole from February 2020, which the curfew and the fear around the curfew and everything, the fears were being stoked as to what is going to happen when the district attorney announces his ruling about the Alvin Cole shooting, which Alvin Cole is a 17-year-old who was at Mayfair Mall with his friends, and was involved in a nonviolent kind of verbal confrontation. And as they were leaving the mall, police were arriving, and they dispersed and ran. Police chased them down. Joseph Mensa, who was a younger officer, again had been involved in two fatal shootings prior to that. And both those shootings actually happened within the first 11 months of him being at the Wauwatosa Police Department. He was the last officer on the scene when for the Alvin Cole incident, the only one to fire.
Right.
And Alvin Cole was shot in the back. And there's some debate because Alvin Cole was found with a weapon that didn't appear to really have. It didn't seem to be prepared in a way, because the police narrative was that Alvin Cole shot the gun in the direction of officers, was trying to shoot officers, and Joseph fired back. There's some discrepancies, of course, in the evidence of that. And it's harder to really speak with a lot of definitiveness until the Milwaukee Police Department releases the investigative file like it's supposed to do. The case is closed. Why isn't this released yet? But the Alvin Cole shooting, which was Joseph Mensa's third shooting, was kind of the kindling for the Wauwatosa protests. And in October, when the curfew came down, of course, that whole ruling was kind of triggering the emergency declaration. And then, of course, allegedly they were getting these credible threats, which maybe even goes to trying to explain why they were so aggressive in Wauwatosa, especially the first 2 days of the curfew from October 7th to the 9th.
Yeah, which was pretty intense. And even after the Alvin Cole shooting, to my understanding, the Common Council voted almost unanimously to fire Mensa, right? But the Police and Fire Commission just chose to suspend him, right? Which I think is pretty. It's pretty important that you have the city, officials that are like, no, we can't have this guy. The special investigator, Biskupich?
Yeah, Stephen Biskupich.
Even he says Mensa's kind of a threat. He needs to be fired.
Quote poses an unnecessary risk is his continued employment.
Right.
At the department.
And he's suspended, and then administrative leave with pay. We got Mensa that's still being paid by Wauwatosa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because after those months and months and months of protest, he resigned in November. He now has a job at the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, a department that has no body cameras and no dash cameras. And some of the issues with all three of his shootings, which is kind of a Wauwatosa issue, is the fact they don't have body cameras. And it seems like these officers, in certain instances, were turning off their dash cameras before they arrive on scene, so there is no video, or the video is limited, because in Alvin Cole's case, there was a foot pursuit. So they get out of the car, and you are seeing a fixed view, you know,
Right. Right.
as they run off and you hear gunshots in the distance and whatever.
Right.
You know,
And what's concerning too about Mensa being with Waukesha now, not only with we have no video evidence of any type of altercation he may or may not get into,
yeah.
but as far as mutual aid, so Mensa could still continue to be working within Wauwatosa, within Milwaukee, within all of these other departments during mutual aid type situations.
Yeah, and I mean, and by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, why you have drones, large drones, and armored trucks, but they don't have body cameras or dash cameras. Just
Right.
going to throw that out there.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts.
Wow, that is a lot of information. Very interesting, you guys. What about targeting protesters' families and families of those killed? Like
Yeah, so
targeting, like pulling Alvin Cole's mother out of the car.
Mm.
Wasn't she protesting at the time?
yeah,
What
and
was that about?
she's in her vehicle, right?
Were you there that night, man?
I was not there. I saw the arrest happening on live. I think it was Talavia's live video. That just from a human standpoint, like I kind of threw journalism out the window. But I'm watching this, and like I even did my own live at that point, and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I need a ride. Somebody get me out to Tosa like immediately. But yeah, that really bothered me because it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Why are we going after a woman, right? That her son is, shot and killed.
Yeah.
And we're dragging her out of a car, right? She's has a disability of sorts, right? And we're targeting this particular family. They really didn't arrest too many people that night.
No, there are a few people who were arrested. A few, I was there that night that was October 8th. So Alvin Cole's decision came down on October 7th,
Right.
2020. October 8th. Man, that was different. I'm sorry, I'm kind of pausing, but that was just different because I remember coming up to 60th Street, which for people who don't know, 60th Street is like a border between Milwaukee and Wauwatosa. It is the border. It's always been the border. When I was in high school, and by the way, I went to high school at Tosa East. I grew up in Milwaukee, but went to high school at Tosa East. When I was in high school, the border was literally like on the Wauwatosa side, the roads were very, very smooth. And immediately on the Milwaukee side, it was potholes and broken up. You could see where the funding was going. It was a symbol of kind of the historic segregation that had always been there. So I'm on 60th Street, and I was able to track down the protest. It was coming up Center Street, right? Coming towards Tosa. And I see a black car pull up, and it was stopped at the stop sign, man. And this haunts me because I was afraid to film these guys. It was two cops, uniformed cops in a blacked out car, and one of them had a camcorder. And he was just kind of chilling with his arm out like this out of the window with the camcorder like that. Yeah, not filming, just it was on him, And I wanted to film him, but I was afraid, man. They were like as close to me, like 10 feet away. I went and talked to a bus man about it. I was like, you see that? You're just to make it feel normal.
Right.
So then we get 2 blocks. So then the green light goes, that black car goes out. That still haunts me to this day that I didn't film it. And they get 3 blocks in, and one of the bicycle scouts came back, right? Because the protests, they're very organized, especially in Milwaukee. They're very organized. They have organized car caravans. They have the bicycle scouts, of course, that go out and scout the path, make sure that it's safe, and also there's a pre-planned route, no construction, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Bicycle scout goes out, comes back, and says, without his bicycle. And he said, they just tried to fucking snatch me. I said, who? And I filmed it. And he said there are these guys fully kitted out, all camo, no insignia, no patches, no nothing, all camis, And they hopped out of an unmarked, like a minivan, like a rental minivan, beat up minivan, like what was driving around in Portland. And they tried to grab him, but they only got the bike, and he ran, and he came back. And in retrospect, you got to think, if they would have gotten him, we would not have been it. We either would have been like, hey, where's dude, and gone looking for him, and either found nothing or found his bike laying on the ground. He would have just vanished. and that's not normal. So he's coming back, and he tells us that he walks off after that, and then one of the protest leaders spots one of those vans that had somehow at some point assimilated itself into the car caravan. So they drive it away. I mean, I saw it. It was these guys, shaved heads, fully kitted out. To me, they looked like guard the way they were fully kitted out. But in retrospect, I'm thinking maybe they were marshals. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
And because they all had the shaved heads, and they looked a little younger. You know, they looked like they could have been guard, but I don't know. I really don't. And of course, this is the same night that Tracy Cole and her family gets arrested, right? So the march kind of doesn't make it that far into Wauwatosa, and they kind of reconvene, and they kind of talk to some guard, kind of like yelling at them or whatever, chanting, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And eventually they just kind of, the whole situation kind of just devolves, and they start to go, getting in different cars. Some are going to go in another caravan and do whatever. Some are retreating. And I remember filming people kind of like running, because they don't even know what they're running from. It was like a heavy vibe. Well, the cops came with a big U-Haul, and that's what kind of kicked it off, like the nervousness. And then everyone kind of starts doing which way, and then I turn around and I see Jay Anderson's parents, who is Mensa's second victim, pull up.
Right.
And they were like, "Hey, what's going on?" I looked at them like, I said, "You guys gotta go. You guys gotta go back to Milwaukee right now." I didn't even know what was going to happen. You just felt that vibe.
Right.
And then I leave. Later on that night, you find out that Tracy Cole, they are ambushed by Tosa PD officers, several of them from the Special Operations Group, which is a fixed covert, they call it covert, a fixed unit within the department, Tosa PD, working together with the U.S. Marshals Task Force. And they arrested them. They took their phones. And like you said, they wounded wounded Tracy Cole. She had to be taken away on a stretcher in an ambulance with a big knot on her forehead. Her arm was wounded. They blackened her eye. It was something, man. It really was something.
Right.
Just that whole
and
night.
These people they're like, it almost seems where when like you and I and Kim and other people that are filing open records requests, it almost seems where we're seeing the same names of
Cops,
protesters plus police officers.
Yeah.
It's the same people that are always showing up consistently in these different documents that we all keep getting.
Yeah.
And then you touched on the phones, which was something I definitely wanted to make sure we talked about, where they're confiscating people's phones during all these arrests, right? And then we have people that are not getting their phones back for days, sometimes weeks, right? Talavia, one of them, got her phone taken away for
over 20 days.
Over 20 days. And then during all these arrests, they're being shipped off to who knows what departments, right? I remember coming out that night, and I made it late, and I ended up having to go to Tosa. I went to Waukesha. Like, I was bouncing, trying to figure out, like, okay, where's everyone at? They're here. Now we're going over here to get these people. Now over here. But when they're arrested, within Tosa, they're being forced to talk to the FBI, right? And to my understanding, maybe you know a little better than I, but to my understanding, FBI can't question within the actual department. Is that right? They actually have to be in a federal building.
There might be some. Well, first off, and I sometimes cops, when you bring back the fact that cops break rules, sometimes people especially cops and defense defense, procedure gets broken, rules get to that scene, and a lot of protests. Right. So I'm just going to that element of it. With that, the FBI, and we just brought up, Wauwatosa, especially during the year once the curfew came down, past Swan Boulevard, which is 2nd Street, past that was I don't think any protesters made it past 2nd Street, and beyond that, that's where Paper Mall and Wauwatosa PD is.
Yeah, because they never
even made it close, they had some protesters, and some of them were medics, so they're wearing a lot of kit, or they were identified as key members of the People's Revolution Protest Group, TPR, they were taken to Mayfair Mall. And they describe in detail. I've talked to one of them in particular who shows me a map, and I'm not even going to say the gender. They showed me a map and the path that they took once they were apprehended by Tosa PD.
Under the mall.
Yeah,
in the-
like coming into the mall parking lot, and then the door. What they described it as was almost like an old receiving bay where they were also keeping garbage and everything in Mayfair Mall that went underground, and under there they were keeping Bearcats, which is a kind of armored vehicle. They had the different armored vehicles for the cops. They had a makeshift booking room in there. There was feds and their FBI. They fingerprinted them. They talked to them. So maybe there's some sort of, like you said, they can't question them at the PD. Maybe that's why that was established there.
Right. And even when they're saying I have nothing to say to you, I want a lawyer, right? Questioning needs to stop. As soon as you say nothing to say, I want a lawyer.
Yeah.
But FBI is still pushing the issue.
Yeah.
Tosa PD still pushing the issue, trying to question these people that are in there. And then with the phones, to my understanding, there's a document, right, where they're talking about we can't get into these cell phones,
Yeah.
right, because we need law enforcement needs a warrant, right, to go through cell phones, right, because that
Yeah.
falls under the Fourth Amendment. And there's a document released, I believe, I think it was through your open records request, where they're talking about take the SIM cards.
Yeah. So that was a batch of emails that I got. So what I did was I open records requested emails from the Special Operations Group, which is a particular group of Tosa PD detectives and officers. How it works is they have like 4 SOG detectives plus a couple of officers who get kind of assigned in rotating fashion, plus a few detectives who aren't SOG, but they're still part of it. It's strange,
Yeah.
you know. But what the unit does, they do covert surveillance, they do they make apprehensions, they do drug overdose investigations, and as of 2012, if you go by their annual report, they started collecting and providing technical assistance with cell phone data recovery and analysis, and so these emails were from their inboxes. And in these emails, they're talking about kind of what happened to the phones after they were taken from the protesters.
Right, because some of them
during
had no
curfew.
idea where's the phone.
Yeah, so
Who has it?
Yeah, so in one string of emails, a lieutenant is kind of reaching out to one of these SOG detectives and saying, "Hey, there weren't that many phones entered into property. Where are they? We kind of have to start returning what we don't want for evidence, that kind of thing." And he gets a very curt answer back, "Hey, we're in the nerd, like they're in the nerd lab, which is their computer forensics unit."
Right.
And by the end of that email chain, there's a note made. Look, the lieutenant took Talivia's phone. The rest are on in a bag next to the Fred, which is like a computer they use for forensics analysis. And it's a question as to why Talivia's phone, after all that, after being taken into the nerd lab, after being separated for 20 days or so, why then it was still segregated from these other phones who were then returned.
Yeah.
The SIM card part was from those same detectives, but it was involving like an unrelated armed robbery case. But it showed kind of I put that in the article because it showed the capabilities of kind of what these cops were able to do with the phones and kind of what they thought. So in that chain, you start to see how, if it's, the cops are saying, if the phone is password protected, it's hard to get in it. But if we can't get in it, then we can take the SIM card out and get subscriber information, the phone number, and then from that we can write subpoenas for more data, and with that particular phone, they said, well, it doesn't have a SIM card in it, so we can't do that. I can't get past the passcode, and et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of showed what these very same cops are kind of like, what they could have possibly done, some of the different tricks that they could have employed with the protesters' phones.
Right. Which is so they're looking for workarounds to kind of get away, around that Fourth Amendment for unreasonable search and seizures. But even still, taking a SIM card to try to gain access to information where they can then later, like you're saying, get subpoenas to get more information. It just seems it seems another level of kind of corruption with this particular department, and I would think I would be safe to say that this is also a common knowledge between a variety of departments across the country, doing pulling tricks like this, trying to find workarounds, where they're essentially breaking the law themselves, trying to get people caught up.
Yeah, and that's just when they're physically taking the phone. So when they physically take your phone, they can do certain things like plug up to what's called a Celebrite, which is like this device that they can physically plug your phone up to, and they can extract the data from it, all the data from it. And there's very, very few rules at the Supreme Court level which govern how the police, how long they can keep that data and what they can, if they can share it or anything like that with other departments. There's very few rules around that, and
Right.
etc. And that's just when they're physically taking it. That's not including long distance, more covert, kind of maybe off the record collection, say through a cell site simulator or a Stingray, which is a powerful surveillance device, which sends out a signal which tricks your phone into thinking that it's a cell tower. So it's a man in the middle of attack, and in doing that, most Stingrays can collect your location data, collect your subscriber information, that kind of stuff. But if it has the right software, it can eavesdrop on your phone calls. It can take your text messages. It can send fake text messages loaded with malware to your phone. It can do a lot of things. It just depends on what the capabilities of that particular device are, because there's state, federal, they have different capabilities.
And that's a tactic that's being used by law enforcement.
Yeah, that device, and that, yeah, absolutely. In the context of the protests, I would suspect that cell site simulators have been used. They are so confident, they are so secret and so confidential that oftentimes the officers feel reluctant to even reveal their use to judges. In cases where they really should review the use of a cell site simulator, they say, we obtain the information from a unknown source or something. And so maybe the judge will let it fly, maybe the judge won't.
Wow.
And that goes to be said. Like these families, a lot of the families report different forms of surveillance. They report, by a lot of the families, I mean families who have experienced police violence beyond the protests. They, just by virtue of their family member being taken from them, it seems like they are placed under some form of surveillance, in person, seeing cars outside their houses, etc., and also odd things happening to their phones, which they may keep to themselves. But 2020, with the protests, the machine kind of came out in the open. A lot of people were seeing drones. A lot of people were having odd things happen to their phones.
What kind of things would happen, like for people that are across the country or even right here in Milwaukee and Tosa and all that? Like what types of things should they be concerned about if their phone is doing?
A lot of people here have been reporting uh, things like the live streaming capabilities not working in suspicious ways.
You hear that, live streamer?
Live streaming capabilities.
I'm listening.
Live streaming capabilities not working in suspicious ways, which of course that could be explained from, like, maybe there's a lot of people in a particular location and a particular cell tower is being overloaded or that kind of thing. But oftentimes that isn't a good enough explanation. I talked to one time I was talking to Frank Nitti outside the Milwaukee police station, where there was no protest. There was a very lightly attended march, and he still couldn't go live. So live streaming capability is not working. Fast battery drain, the battery getting hot, because and oftentimes cell site simulators will make your phone do that kind of thing, because they can interfere, because of the nature of how they work. They can interfere with cell service. They can deny cell service, like a denial of service attack. Like they can, they can do those things intentionally or sometimes perhaps unintentionally. When you look at leaked documents about how Stingrays and cell site simulators work, they're prone to all kinds of things like radio frequency overloads and things. And at that point, you got to wonder, well, how well trained are these cops to really use that and not and use it in a proper way. So back to the symptoms, fast battery drain, hot, the battery getting hot, calls dropping, static in the call, which surges and then drop the call, echoes in the phone call, clicks, beeps, other odd things. The phone not wanting to turn off or on, kind of defying what you tell it to do.
Do you think these things were happening after the John Doe hearing? That
I've talked to a few people who had some odd things happen to their phones. My phone was kind of acting a little funny that day, actually. It was telling me to, it wouldn't let me call out like my car. I don't know. I was having some issues with my car, which were probably nothing,
Right.
But they prevented me conveniently from going to the John Doe thing, which worked out because I got to film it from my house anyways, and they didn't let people film inside. But yeah, like I tried to call my mom because I needed AAA. I needed her to email me my card, and it was telling me I couldn't call out. I needed to activate some setting in my phone to enable Wi-Fi calling, and then I turned my phone off, turned it back on, all my text messages were gone, and
Oh, wow.
it was really strange. And they're all back now, but that doesn't matter. It's like this stuff doesn't happen. Why today?
Right, right.
So I gotta tell you, man. I mean, like there's been a lot of, I mean, like I had a Trojan exploit hit my computer a couple days after the incident at Officer Mensa's house, and people have to understand that that especially when you're talking about America, a lot of these methods, a lot of these technologies started out in the defense community, and we've had a lot of years practicing on other people around the world, and those methods always make it home. They always make it home, always, and that's kind of what's happening. So people have to understand that there is a wide range of ways that your privacy can be infiltrated and invaded. They don't have to use it in a court. All they want to do is know.
right.
So
And that's like with the ALPR things that Kenosha was trying to put in that we've
What's that?
seen in the automatic license plate
Oh, yeah.
readers. So that's been a huge privacy concern as well. And
Yeah.
we see that with tollway technology. A lot of these cities are putting these license plate readers in that are capable of facial recognition.
Yeah.
Targeting specific individuals, specific groups of people. And Kenosha tried to do this, and that grant was blocked. So, which was pretty important. Now, you had mentioned the SOG unit. We were kind of talking off camera about Wauwatosa PD being at the Renaissance Hotel over by Mayfair up on that sixth floor. So you had mentioned that you had seen stuff like that as well, and then one of the more recent protests that I just filmed with TPR, we noticed them up there again. Do you think that is that the SOG unit? Is that just random officers? Do
I
we
don't know, to be honest with you. Those could be random officers who are just assisting in this kind of protest detail that they have, and that's just what I'm calling it. It's just, it appears not only that, through the months, it was the same cops showing up to when we're talking about Wauwatosa, it's these same cops showing up to the protests, and yeah, they only have 90 officers, but it's the same 10 or 15 cops showing up every single time. And so when you look at some of the emails that I've received and etc., there is they were looking for volunteers to kind of fill these kinds of things that they're doing against the protesters. Hey, we need a detail to police the protest today. Who wants in, kind of thing.
Right.
Now those very well could be SOG officers, and that would be the kind of thing that they would do. But they could also do a variety of other things, and you don't have to be special operations group to sit in a black
To sit up
car
there.
and
Yeah.
sit up there and signal to someone who comes and goes.
Do you think that's necessary now for them to be all stakeout like up inside of hotel rooms, staring down?
I think that those kinds of things should really make people really question what they want their police department funds to really go to, because obviously this guy is whoever that is. I mean, like like, yeah, there's people up in the rafters or up in the windows watching. You also have cops driving past constantly. You have cops in the parking lot across the street. Do you really need all these cops here to watch a group of 10 to 15, maybe 50 people who are not doing anything, you know? Uh, in Milwaukee, the posturing beyond any kind of aside any kind of covert element that we may not be aware of, the posturing from Milwaukee PD at this point appears to be, hey, let's just make sure that we know where the protest is so that we can route the buses the right way, and let's just drive past a few times, make sure they're not fucking with people, you know, and if they're not, then leave them be,
Right.
you know. Uh, is it necessary? They may feel that it's necessary. Maybe they're just trying to fill overtime. I'm not sure. It could be a culture issue within the department as well. When Barry Weber went to the body camera meeting months and months and months ago when they were talking about body cameras for Wauwatosa at City Hall, he brought a detail, like a detail of probably 10, 15 cops with him, you know,
Right.
who were they left in a convoy, you know, and it's like, is it necessary to have, because while you have 10 to 15% of your department, because there's only 90 of you, while you have 10 to 15% of your department here guarding you, I guess, where are the rest of the officers doing? You have to have officers doing real police work, right?
Right.
And you know, when it comes to overtime, like, policing is expensive, you know, so is it necessary? That's a question that the people of Wauwatosa really need to consider. But I mean, public safety threat in terms of, are these a dangerous groups of people? I mean, I don't think that, if you're looking at it from that perspective, I don't think it's justified to really sit up and watch them from 20 stories up.
Right. Do you think that try to helps them, Tosa PD, validate this whole where it seems like they're really trying to focus down on trying to throw out federal indictments. You released the high value target with Mayor McBride.
Uh-huh.
Tosa's doing this like covert operation against the mayor. Do you think like all of that today is necessary compared to during curfew and all of this? Like, what's the purpose behind trying to
It
bring
seemed,
all this stuff?
you know, it seems with the high value targeting of the mayor and the context behind that, once again, open records, you know. Uh, Everyone who's watching, especially in Wisconsin, just know that you can file open records yourself. It's really easy, and it's legal and it's within your rights to do so. You can do it with police, you can do it with any city official apparatus. Learn it, do it, there you go. So each state is different. I don't know who's watching from where. But anyway, so like you said, the high value targeting thing came from open records. So a little context behind that. It was a PowerPoint that I got from the special operations group emails. And it was a PowerPoint that had to do with the incident at Officer Mensa's house where protesters went there, and there was a confrontation of sorts between Officer Mensa, perhaps instigated by Officer Mensa, perhaps not. I say that because there's a lot of officer there was a lot of contradictory statements
Right.
that were made. You know, Officer Mensa made a Facebook post saying that he was shot at several times. Toast PD confirms that there was only one shot, and it appears to be kind of like an accident scuffle kind of situation. People, you know, Tosa is trying to frame it as kind of like a targeted kind of thing, but it doesn't really appear to be that. So this PowerPoint was made as a follow up, as a case update to that whole investigation. Okay, and it identified 4 high value targets. A few of them were people involved in the protests. I wasn't surprised to see that. The last one was Mayor Dennis McBride of Wauwatosa, and it said, the PowerPoint slide said that he sanctioned violence against Joseph Mensa, which wasn't true. It called into question the fact that he had met with protesters, that he had met with attorney Kimberly Motley and her partner Deja Vishny, her law partner, that they had question and answer sessions talking about race and everything. Like the Toast PD SOG framed this as evidence almost, or as infractions that the mayor was doing, and he was just providing a venue and a platform for people in his community to talk about these issues, you know. That's really all he was doing. And then the very last bullet point says, no probable cause in Mensa shooting ... yet. So this email, this PowerPoint, was sent by SOG detective named Joseph Landowski. This guy is in a interrogation video during the curfew talking to one of the protesters, calling the mayor a chicken shit, talking about how all these problems with everything started because of Attorney Motley, and she's to blame for this, and she's a crook, and
Right.
getting this kid to kind of try to answer his questions for him, like why does she want to do this? Oh, I don't know, say it. Money. Yeah, money, like that kind of
Right.
conversation. You know?
Yeah, he. So you released a clip of that video.
Yeah.
And I believe mainstream media did too. We
Yeah.
put the whole video out, minus kind of the beginnings of that where it mentions
Yeah.
kind of who it is, and we
The
put
situation.
we put like a sticky note covering the identity of the person. But we put out on the Never Stop Voices YouTube channel. We put out essentially the whole video,
Yeah.
so that people could really see and get the context behind. It's kind of the way we do it, where just so we avoid you're trying to fill a narrative, right, where everyone just puts that 20-second, 30-second clip out. We try to put as much of the whole thing as we possibly can, trying to safeguard people, though, too, at the same time. But
Which is something that Toast PD didn't do with that open record stuff.
yeah, and you and I both got a lot of confidential informant videos that should have never been released.
Those people were promised anonymity, and actually I found other documents where they were referred to as confidential informants.
Right.
In fact, in that Mayor High Value Target PowerPoint, the individual was referred to as a confidential informant. So that wasn't a lie, because police can lie to you.
Right.
They can lie to your face, and it's okay. It's legal for them to do that.
Right.
To further investigation. They didn't lie to him. They just didn't protect him, and that it's really important. Especially in the context of the Mensa investigation, that and throwing out federal indictments or whatever people are worried that they're going to do or maybe try to do, people have to understand that whole investigation, in my eyes, is very thoroughly tainted. So getting back to the Mayor High Value Target, that is an example of the Tosa PD. This became personal. This became very, very, very personal for at least some people in that department. They were department leadership, the police union president. So, this PowerPoint was sent on September 1st, 2020, that to a supervisor in the investigative bureau of WPD. Okay. That same day, Chief Weber sends out 2 letters, one to the Office of Lawyer Regulation to get Kim Motley's bar license removed, for her involvement in representing the protests and etc. and the families. One to one of the top Republicans in the state legislature to try to get Representative David Bowen expelled. Okay, you have these repeated targeting of specific people, and yet when confronted with the mayor high value target issue by the mayor, because the mayor had no issue, I showed up to his house unannounced one night and showed him that PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And I said, look, the police aren't your friends. Look at this. And I mean, and by the police aren't your friends, I'm not saying in general. Me to Mayor McBride, look, I'm about to show you something.
Right.
And
he's
really
kind of
look at it.
backpedaled, like it's almost like, oh, they would never do that to me.
Yeah.
Chief Weber talked to me, and he's going
said
to
he had no
investigate,
idea.
and he doesn't know what's up.
Yeah, and that's the issue. That's what I'm trying to say. Like the fact that Chief Weber says that he had no idea that PowerPoint was made. This PowerPoint is an investigative PowerPoint about if we're to believe your narrative, meaning the police, if we're to believe the police narrative, a premeditated attack against one of your officers by protesters. And you don't know that this PowerPoint existed. Not that the mayor was placed on a high value target. He said he didn't know the PowerPoint existed.
Right.
And that the police never accumulated evidence against the mayor, that they never considered him a high value target. And yet, this is a very personal, important investigation. And the same day that this PowerPoint is sent out, which mentions David Bowen, which mentions Attorney Motley, you, Chief Weber, who allegedly doesn't know about the PowerPoint, sends out 2 letters, trying to get both of these people essentially removed from their professional positions.
Right.
The very next day, on September 2nd, the Wauwatosa Peace Officer Association president, their police union, and he's also a detective involved in these investigations, sends out a press release targeting members of the Common Council of Wauwatosa and Mayor McBride for condemning them, saying, "How dare you ask for Mensa to be fired, and how dare you not support us? How dare you not back us? And
Right.
we're going to do something about this," and that kind of thing. And yet you don't know.
Right.
So Chief Weber chose between two things. He chose between, I'm not managing my department and I don't know about this very important PowerPoint, or I'm not telling the truth to you.
Right. Which seems, with a lot of these documents that are coming out, and even in this John Doe hearing, which we're going to talk about here, it seems almost where Weber's trying to just have this plausible deniability, where it's, well, I don't really know.
But you're the
we're,
chief.
We're finding out in documents that Weber does know, right? He's, denying that he has any knowledge or access to any type of investigatory reports when it comes to Mensa's shooting with Jay Anderson, right? And this dates back even, and we kind of, I don't want to get too detailed, but we talked a little bit off camera about an incident that happened in late 90s.
Yeah.
Where it seems like Weber does know about things, and he's kind of behind closed doors, little cloak and dagger stuff, and then pulling the strings like the puppeteer. But then publicly, he's like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
But he keeps being caught multiple times lying,
Mm-hmm.
and that's if what we were talking about from the late 90s, where incidents, you're talking 20, 30 years worth of a chief of police orchestrating different things and then lying to courts, lying to the general public,
Misleading or omitting facts.
right, consistently, and even like with the Martin Luther King parties that were happening, many years ago within that department, where again he says, "Oh, I don't know anything about this," but yet he's almost condoning, by ignoring kind of that these things are actually happening. It's almost condoning that, well, I'm allowing my
Forced
department
to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he says he doesn't know about the Mayor High Value Target PowerPoint, but he did know, he had to have known about the protester list they made, which, one of the things that Toast PD could easily say about how far afield they kind of went with some of the things they were doing with the protests. They might say, "Oh well, we were wound up by this incident at Officer Mensa's house or whatever." Look, you made you made a PowerPoint. Sorry, you made the protester list, which is at least 40 people, and we don't even know who's on that list yet. That was made a couple weeks after protests began in Wauwatosa and a month or so before the incident at Officer Joseph Mensa's house, and you're CC'd in that email.
Right.
You're in that email.
Right. And that document was just an update to that list. So we're not even sure yet when did this list
really
start.
Created.
Right. Right.
Exactly.
But like you said, he CC'd. You saw the email. You had to have. How do you not see that you're CC'd on it?
And if you didn't know, then are you not paying attention?
Right. Right. Which is equally as dangerous though too, if you're not paying attention to what's happening in your department, because now you're allowing your officers to just run around willy-nilly doing whatever it is that they want, like this big giant gang unit, you know what I mean? And controlling all of Wauwatosa, not only its citizens but also council members and other.
Yeah, and I mean, this pattern of targeting elected officials. We got David Bowen being targeted in different ways by Toast PD. We got the mayor being placed on a high-value target list. We got the same guy who sent the PowerPoint calling the mayor a chicken shit and yada, yada, yada. We don't even know if he made the PowerPoint. And by the way, there's allegedly an internal investigation done by the chief of police about that PowerPoint. We still haven't heard the results from that. It's been over 40 days.
Right.
Okay, and what is discipline going to look like? Because the mayor said that's going to be likely what? You're going to make Joseph Lewandowski go home for a week with pay for putting you on a high value target list,
Right.
So we also got the issue with Heather Call, who was a former Wauwatosa alderman, who was the first person on the council to call for Mensa to be fired, and her personal Twitter account, which wasn't even that scandalous. It was just her kind of cussing and talking crap about Republicans, which this is America, you're allowed to do. That was leaked to this conservative talk radio show that Chief Weber had been on and Joseph Mensa had been on in the months prior.
Is that the Dan O'Donnell
Dan
show?
O'Donnell, you know? So it's like we have multiple instances in press releases, in actions, and in kind of those kinds of things that we can kind of loosely connect dots that, look, you are targeting elected officials. This feels, especially when you put in the FBI, this feels like COINTELPRO. This feels like which is what the FBI did against left-wing groups, many groups, but lots of left-wing groups in the 50s and 60s and 70s,
Right.
Early 70s.
Right.
It really does feel that, and it's such a fascinating story because it seems to have no end. And this is everything we've really talked about has happened within the last 10 months, basically.
Right. Right.
The more you dig, you find things about Tosa that are concerning and disturbing and are consistent. Like, there's an issue of respecting people's rights. There's an issue of accountability and transparency. There's an issue of targeting certain people, targeting cops, fellow cops even, and when they don't fit in. I guess that's the last thing I can say about that, is that it feels like from the 90s to now, probably before the 90s, because Wauwatosa was really built on a foundation of, I'm going to say, white supremacy. You know, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in America.
Yep.
And this is a place where housing covets existed that said on paper, black people cannot own this home. Okay, so you have to have a police department that's willing to police in that way, because it's not just garden variety racism, it's on the books racism, you know?
Right.
So stay over on that side of 60th Street, you know, and then you have that for years and years and years. Then you have the Martin Luther King Day parties that you mentioned that they're racist undertones and etc. Then Chief Weber drops out of the sky to allegedly clean up the mess. But really what it seems to be is he was someone who's really good at cleaning things up in terms of keeping it quiet, not reforming things.
Not reforming, right.
And Tosa PD, it seems like, whether it was racial, the racial element, whether it was what they were doing when I was in high school, when they were targeting kids who were essentially hippies, you know, who didn't really fit in with the image of Wauwatosa, whether you're talking about protests, it seems that this department is used to sending one message. It picks certain groups or certain people and says, you don't belong here. And we are going to send the message. We are going to put the fear of God in you until you get it. And they need to get over that. This is 2021. You need to police in a community-driven fashion, not we're Wauwatosa and we're here to keep out all the undesirables. That's not how it should work.
Right.
And it seems like the protest was like that volcano kind of blowing over.
Yeah. And Tosa just doesn't seem to care. They're just like, we're going to continue to do it our way.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to cover it up. We're going to try to hide it. And even if certain documents get out, we still don't care.
We'll just wait for people to forget.
Right. And we're going to just keep moving on.
Because these are just tame suburbanites anyways, and they don't question, but they actually are starting to question. You saw a lot of tame-looking suburban people staring the National Guard in their grill, daring them to do something.
Right.
You know?
And there's a lot of, like, when you say that, there's a lot of, so Wauwatosa is primarily white.
Yeah.
86, 87%.
Yeah.
Predominantly white. And you have a lot of, you know, I nickname it White Tosa. I don't need to be correct about anything. But it's true, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But you have a lot of white Wauwatosa residents that are coming out and showing support for TPR when they're coming down the streets and joining the marches, right? Holding fists up. You have little coalitions that are forming with these white residents that are coming out, and they're saying enough is enough.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And then, you know, with a lot of presentations that are going on now with dot mapping, highlighting where in a predominantly white community,
they're basically only arresting black people.
right? And that statistically, it's proven, it's shown with, you know, traffic stops, and then arrests stemming from those, where, you know, 2/3 of a pie graph is predominantly black and brown residents of Wauwatosa.
You look at demographics, heat maps kind of with the last census, and they really do keep him. By they, I mean Wauwatosa. Like a lot of the black and brown residents are really kept on the edge perimeter, like closest to Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
The further west you go, the harder it is to get a house. My mom tried to get a house in Wauwatosa. It took a few tries. They turn you away at the door. You know, it's okay when I'm talking to you on the phone and you can't assume what I look like based off of how I'm talking to you. But then when I see you to your face, all of a sudden I can't. All of a sudden, oh, we already sold it.
Right.
You know,
Which goes back to all that redlining from many, many years ago where, you know, you have the supremacy today that's saying, well, this doesn't happen. And it's like, well, no, it does. It's still happening. Here's proof. This is actually going on. And you're showing it by all the statistics. You're showing it by old laws still on the books that are kind of underground, secretly still being kind of enforced.
Yeah, it's like old software or something, you know, and it's really unfortunate because right now you have a situation where the mayor of Wauwatosa says, you know, like Wauwatosa, the Wauwatosa that he grew up in was a racist community, but it's not like that anymore. Well, then what was that Whites for Wauwatosa letter that went out during the summer? For people who don't know, there are some people in Wauwatosa who were sold signs, like these yard signs, were kind of just vaguely said they're dissatisfied with the mayor. You know, it didn't have any overt racial element on it or anything, just kind of like, you know, we don't like the mayor. And during that time, you know, if you didn't like the mayor, it could be assumed that you didn't like the mayor because they weren't kicking out the protests or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it didn't have any overt message like that, right? So these people were getting thank you letters from a group calling itself the Whites of Wauwatosa, which were saying that they need to keep the blacks out and their lack of morals, and thank you for showing your support, and et cetera, et cetera. Tosa PD said that we're not going to investigate that because it doesn't rise to the level of criminal activity. And there's no threats here, there's no nothing. How do they intend to keep the blacks out? I don't really know. You know, you don't ask the blacks kindly to stay out, you know. Keeping the blacks out sounds pretty proactive to me. How do they intend to keep the blacks out? And then they said, well, we've never heard of this group, and kind of saying that it seems like a fake group. Look, I'm not a cop, I'm an investigative journalist. Here's how I would have gone about it. Well, I don't know who the people are. Okay, walk up to that house with that sign outside and ask them folk, when did you get this letter? Oh yeah, we got it when we bought that sign. Who did you buy the sign from? Where did you get it from? Was it a website? That's how you find out who put out the Whites for Wauwatosa letter.
Right.
And yet somehow this isn't a community that has these racial issues. And when they did that question and answer session back in the summer about racial issues, which by the way got the mayor on a high value target list, there were people coming out. Most of the people were talking, you know, about kind of pro-Black Lives Matter things, or just admitting, look, like one 90-year-old white woman called in the middle of the pandemic and said, look, I've lived here my entire life. I'm 90-something. This is a racist community. It always has been, and it hasn't changed.
Right.
And then he had other people coming out talking about black-on-black crime, talking about how it's not a racist community anymore, and people need to take responsibility for themselves, and Joseph Mensa did his job, which is another, you know, there's layers to this. You know, Joseph Lewandowski in that interrogation video, one of the things he said was like, he was talking about Alvin Cole, and he said that's the most justified one of them all, but they all chose that. He chose that night. They all chose that. And there's like this kind of disturbing mentality.
Yeah,
you know?
it was really sickening what he said in that interview, and it's like, what do you mean they all chose it? Antonio Gonzalez is having a mental health issue, right? We don't know where his state of mind is. Is he even coherent?
Yeah.
Because if he has, like, I have complex PTSD, right? So if I get triggered pretty intense, I'm in a complete flashback. I have no concept of reality. So was Antonio Gonzalez in that same type of situation where his reality is not actual reality?
Exactly.
You have Jay Anderson
sitting in the car and
sleeping,
yeah.
intoxicated.
And we can't tell. No one can ever. There's a couple things that people can, and this is kind of, Jay Anderson's kind of a good proxy for the whole Tosa PD issue in terms of them controlling people's perceptions. With Jay Anderson, the only thing that's left of that entire incident is less than 30 seconds of mute dash footage. and where you don't see a gun, you don't see anything. You see Jay, doing this, and then when he gets too low, like the second or like the third or fourth time, he Mensa unloads 6 bullets into his head and 1 in his shoulder. Like 5 shots, and then 1 got him in the shoulder.
So
or something.
6 shots total. So why don't we talk about that since we're on it? So 6 shots total, 4 hit him, right? 3 in the head and face, 1 in his top shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. And that's 2 where, like we've mentioned already, with Joseph Mensa having conflicting statements.
This had, and by just for context, June
23rd,
2016.
A
year, 11 months after he shot Antonio
Gonzalez. Right. So you have Jay Anderson, who is asleep in his vehicle in Madison Park, right? He's there for some time. There's footage of him, I think, entering the park about 1:30 in the morning, something. And then there's the confrontation with Mensa, where Mensa comes in. Video footage of Mensa pulling in, and then essentially 5 minutes of who knows what happened.
Yeah.
Because he didn't activate his squad cam.
Yeah.
Right? And then we just see Mensa in this shooting position.
Yeah.
And then, shots fired.
No audio.
Yeah, and it's like he turns the body camera on after he's done shooting, and thankfully these things go back 28 seconds, so we actually captured the shooting, which we're starting to see all over the country, where these law enforcement officers are not activating body cameras and then getting caught because this thing has a 28-second thing.
And with Tosa, there were no body cameras. There's this dash camera.
Right, right. No body cams at the time. So he's, Jay Anderson shot and killed. And then we have sometime later Alvin Cole, and then here comes Wonder Woman, Kimberly Motley, that comes in, and she says, basically, enough is enough, right? We need to start looking into this. Something's not right. It kind of comes out with Biskubich doing the investigatory stuff when it came to Alvin Cole, where looking at Antonio Gonzalez, looking at Jay Anderson Jr.'s case, where there's so many conflicting things and so much just kind of like red flag when it came to Jay Anderson's case, where now you have Kim Motley, who's representing the 3 families and the protesters and all the stuff, where she's doing something historical here in Wisconsin. She files a John Doe motion to get a hearing. Yeah. So for those that don't know what that is, so essentially if a district attorney refuses to file a criminal complaint, then this John Doe hearing can be scheduled, where the attorney comes and presents evidence, documents, witnesses, video, whatever it may be. No cross-examination, right? It's considered ex parte. No counsel. Witnesses can't have their own right to counsel, and you present evidence to a judge, and then at that point it's up to a judge on whether or not they're going to issue that there is probable cause for criminal complaint, and then special prosecutor to be assigned. So this has never happened. So she's doing something extremely historical, and then we have on. Was it February 25th was
that was the hearing,
the initial day of the hearing. So we have 3 people that testify. So we have Jay Anderson's friend, Hakeem Fudge, that testifies first.
I never talked.
Nobody. That's the thing. There's nobody that talks to this guy. Nobody.
And I kind of beat myself up about some aspects of it. Not only with that, but some of the things that Kim found out about the Jay case, because that was one of my first cases ever investigating as a freelancer. 2016 was at 4 years, so I was like 19 or 20 when this happened, so I kind of beat myself up, like, how come I didn't think of that, but it's like, it shouldn't be left up to 19, 20-year-old freelance kids with no real gig, and they don't even know if they're going to get one, to thoroughly investigate these things. Why didn't the media dig in?
Why didn't the media dig in? Why didn't law enforcement just do their job the way that we expect them to do their jobs, number one? But yeah, nobody talks to him. Nobody gets a statement from him. Nobody's inquiring what was Jay's, mental kind of thought process that night. Was he having a bad day? Was he suicidal? Is he confrontational? And none of this is being questioned. And Fudge, testifies during the John Doe hearing to kind of what Jay Anderson's mental state was that day, and he's not a confrontational person, never has been.
They were chilling.
They're chilling at a local bar. He's
they
talking
knew?
about going, yeah, that they knew. They frequented areas that he kept saying in his testimony, safe places, where there would be no confrontation. It would be safe. There would potentially be no fighting, just no BS.
Yeah,
right.
and
They just want to chill.
Madison Park is a nice spot. My grandparents don't live too far from there, and I used to catch snakes in that park when I was a kid.
Nice.
So it's a nice place. Nice
Right,
park.
it's super
not a
chill.
sketch area.
Right. So they leave. He testifies that day, which is a kind of a critical piece of information where they need their IDs to get into the bar. They are ID'd, in fact, right, which is why they were let in.
Yeah.
And then kind of fast forward, you have Jay enters Madison Park, right? He's sleeping. Fudge kind of testified. He kind of came back and forth trying to get him to leave, like, hey, bud, time to go home type stuff, whatever. And he just keeps saying, yeah. And Fudge leaves. He goes home. And then again, fast forward here, you have Mensa, where in video you see him, enters the park. You have a 5-minute delay in any footage whatsoever.
Where you're just going off of his word.
Off his word. So he gives statements during these investigations of he's having this dialogue with Jay. There's no proof of it. There's no video of it. There's nothing. But even in his dialogue where, and we outline this in our article that we put out covering the John Doe hearing, you have Mensa's statement of when he observes a gun on the passenger seat, that there's a cell phone and there's currency on the passenger seat next to the gun, right? But then in investigation reports, you have a Wauwatosa police officer who is searching Jay Anderson's pockets for what? You're involved.
You're supposed to be. I mean, and they pulled him out presumably to provide medical attention to him. But they're going through his pockets.
Right, and there's no, as far as we know, there's no medical attention that's provided. It's not shown on videos. Presumably, they feel a faint pulse, potentially on Jay. No CPR that's given. You're going through his pockets.
They also kept the fire department off of the from coming into the actual parking lot until they had both pulled Jay out of the car and, which you're probably going to get to, remove the gun.
Right, and remove the gun. So Tosa, in a document that's released, says we have items that are in his left pocket. Milwaukee, when they file their report, says these items were in the right pocket, right? So you have Mensa's story of, well, we found items on the passenger seat. Tosa cop says, well, it was in his left pocket. Milwaukee cop says, well, no, it's in his right pocket.
And then Mensa said that he asked Jay if he had ID.
And Jay said no, which wasn't true because we know he had ID. Multiple documents say that he had ID, plus Fudge's testimony that he needed the ID to get in. So we're already, Wauwatosa should not be on the scene per Wisconsin statute from the Michael Bell shooting back in 2004, I believe it was, where law is passed that departments can't investigate themselves. We have Lewandowski, who's interviewing fire and paramedic personnel.
We actually have some of these same, not just Lewandowski, because he's part of SOG, the Special Operations Group. We have a couple of Special Operations Group guys and other WPD detectives returning to the scene days after the shooting.
After, right. They're looking for witnesses. They're trying to question people. So the day of, plus days later, they're still doing this stuff. There's dozens of over a dozen reports by almost 20 Tosa PD, that are investigating, whether it's an officer or detective or whatever, and they're not supposed to. We released the entire footage of Mensa's squad cam with the shooting itself, and then you have a Wauwatosa police officer who's removing the gun, right?
Yeah.
So you're not supposed to touch this gun unless the subject is still alive and it's still an active threat situation. You can grab the gun. Now,
Mensa said that threats down, I'm okay before they even showed up for
before they
backup.
get there, right? And here in the video that we released, they're pulling the gun out of the passenger seat. They're handling the gun. They're like playing with it. You kind of see it on the video, and then they're walking with their backs to the camera, which is suspicious. That why? What are you doing that for? And then at the very end of that video, you kind of see them where they're like motioning their hand, like come over, like get away from the camera, type thing. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot just in the video that's questionable. You have the medical examiner that came and testified that day. She's specifically testifying to kind of straight through and through as far as the angle of the gunshots, which is not consistent with Mensa's statement of lunging for a gun, which he doesn't mention in the beginning of the investigation. He doesn't mention anything about Jay Anderson lunging for a gun. And then later on, and this is what William Harmoning testified to, is that where he believes that Mensa needed to find reason, find justification for shooting Jay. We touched on it in the thing where he needs to add a movement. He needs to add some type of abruptness that justifies him, pulling the trigger and killing him. We see in the video that Jay does kind of move his hands up and down. You kind of see him, rocking back and forth. We need to keep in mind he was just woken up. You know what I mean? He's heavily intoxicated.
And he's a heavy sleeper, according to his family and Hakeem. He's a very heavy sleeper, and he's very hard to. Hakeem mentioned when they were still at the bar, he had to ride around the block several times or something to make sure Jay would leave the bar because he was like sleep in his car, and he was like, "Bro, will you please go home so that I can go home?
Right.
Because I just want to make sure you get home good.
Right.
And I can't leave until you leave." So then he eventually, the last time he saw him, he said that he rolled around the block again, and then he noticed that Jay had found his way to a gas station.
Right. Which that's another thing too. Like nobody's taken gas station footage from Jay's time at the gas station when none of. So it seems like to some it may seem like an ancillary detail, but it's almost important to kind of lay out a timeline of what was going on. But yeah, like you're right. His family and friends are making statements that he's very heavy sleeper. Right. Mensa makes a comment about how he thought he was fake sleeping. Right.
Yeah,
I think we've all in this room had some cocktails and we've passed out and people have nudged us. You know what I mean?
And you couldn't wake them up.
Right.
Either you've been there, you've had to wake someone up.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's not hard to fathom that he wasn't fake sleeping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because of his blood alcohol level, 0.114, and being abruptly woken up, and Harmoning testifies where you have multiple hand movements, up and down, up and down. Why doesn't Mensa shoot the first few times?
Yeah.
Right? He makes mention of when we see the body camera or the dash cam actually activated, Mensa's already in this firing position. Right? We don't even know if there's a crime committed yet. How would Mensa have known this type of stuff? You know what I mean? We don't know. I should probably stop saying we. Mensa would not know, is the gun legal? Right? Does he have open carry? Does he have concealed carry? Does he have any of this? Is this a legal item or not? There's no crime that he knows of. He's in a park. It's a local ordinance ticket. Big deal, right?
And we cannot, and that's the thing, like with the way that the evidence, like with the dash camera being mute, with the limitations in the actual footage, with Mensa saying in his statement that he's hazy, as to quote hazy, as to some aspects as to what happened during the interaction, and with the fact that you never actually see the gun, and the fact that the scene was tampered with essentially through the officers taking the gun out of the car. What you have is a situation where you're looking at mute dash footage that you can barely see what's happening in it, and there's multiple versions of this dash footage, and they release the lowest quality. Some of it is some versions are clear, some versions are kind of overlaid with like a weird infrared kind of thing, etc. What you have is a situation where this police department is telling people, and we were just talking about Wauwatosa, the demographics, and it's this kind of like suburban white town where up until recently people didn't ask a whole lot of questions as to what the police department was doing. In fact, one gentleman, Eric Fanning, who is a veteran, actually a Navy veteran, and goes out to has been out to the protests. He mentioned, like people in Wauwatosa, especially the people who are kind of in an uproar over the police. They're like, look, like Barry Weber is looking at us saying like, well, I was policing this way. This is how I kept you safe all this time. Why do you have a problem with it now? Well, we see it now. We see how you're doing it, and we don't like that. Our eyes are open now. We see
Right.
what goes on behind the curtain. You
Right.
know. So, but with Jay Anderson and with that video, with everything I just mentioned, you have a situation where you have that department telling those people, this is what you're supposed to be seeing. You're supposed to be seeing a man lunge, a scary man, and he's black and everything, lunging for a gun against one of these officers who goes out of their way to protect you all the time.
Right, and you put that narrative out, and then that's what the brain is going to visualize when they're trying to look at these things, and it's once again it's blackmail, criminal.
You don't take into consideration. You don't know what's being said. You don't know what Joseph Mensa is telling him. This could be a Philando Castile type situation where the officer in that case, different state, don't ask me where, the officer in that situation, Philando Castile, who was the shooting victim, he said, "Look, I have a legal gun on me," and the officer said, "Okay, cool. You got ID? Yeah, I got ID. Okay, go for the ID." He goes for ID. He gets shot. And the officer is freaking out, and he's like losing emotional kind of control. He's like hyperventilating and stuff. So it's like, we don't know what Joseph Mensa is telling you. Are you telling him to give you your ID? Are you telling him to get out of the car? Are you telling him to put the car in some sort of gear, or maybe, he was drunk. Maybe he parked the car and didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Are you telling him to turn off the car?
Right.
You don't know what's being said, and you never see the gun you never see the gun, period.
Right.
And,
And even in the video, it doesn't even appear, and Harmoning testified to this, it doesn't appear that he even lunged for the gun. And like Harmoning's testifying that Jay Anderson was not shot because he lunged for a gun. He's shot because Mensa creates this dangerous situation by his approach, right? By coming from the front, illuminating the car from the front, being on that passenger side the way he is, the distance that he is away from the car.
Yeah.
And that Anderson is shot because Mensa lost sight of the right hand.
Right.
And not, in fact, that he reaches for a gun, which the entry wounds of the bullets aren't even consistent with somebody leaned over or lunging. If it's straight, you know what I'm saying, then that would mean, just from that fact alone, that Jay Anderson didn't lean, didn't lunge, didn't reach. He's in an upright position, and those are the first three shots. The fourth shot, and you see very clear in this horrific video that clearly the first shot is
a kill shot
to Jay's head, right?
You see, you can, without going too much in detail, you can see the result on the other side of the window.
Right. And seeing, it's, and we saw some of these pictures in the courtroom that day. Very difficult to look at. But that's exactly right, the kill shot, which even Harmoning said, if this is the kill shot, this is the first shot right to his head, why are we firing 5 other times? Even regardless if it's 2.8 seconds, 2.6 seconds, whatever it is, why are we continuing to fire the gun 5 more times when we've already struck the subject once in the head, right? It's clearly a kill shot.
Yeah.
And again, it's just things are not consistent. There's too many conflicting stories. And then you've got, where Mensa's trying to file a motion to quash the subpoena.
Yeah.
You have Chief Weber filing a motion to quash the subpoena because Weber doesn't know anything.
Yeah, and he's saying in his thing that Weber's saying in his motion to quash, look, we don't have any documents. Toasty doesn't have any documents. We didn't produce anything. The Milwaukee Police Department investigated the shooting per Wisconsin state law.
Right. Tosa didn't investigate.
Chief Weber didn't see the body, nothing.
Right.
And all this was shown in court, and not just speculative, not just this, and
this is physical. This is damning evidence.
Physical evidence, sworn affidavits. Like, no, you have documents. You went down to see the body, and there's no documentation. There's nothing to tie you to actually going down to the medical examiner's office. But you say under sworn when you're asked to do a deposition, which you can't. You're not supposed to lie. You know, you say that you went down there.
Right.
You know?
And that's the thing is Dr. Salomak testifies that Mensa wasn't in the autopsy room, and that to her knowledge he wasn't down there because he would have to log in
Chief Weber. Chief Weber wasn't in the.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
that Weber wasn't in the thing, and then you have this document that's released where Weber's, like you're saying, he's admitting, I did go down, I did look at Jay Anderson's body, I examined the wounds, and it's like, well, first off, why are you there? You
And
shouldn't be there. Again, according to Wisconsin law, there's dozens of reports by officers that Wauwatosa that's investigating.
Wauwatosa detectives and MPD detectives were in that autopsy
Right,
room
right.
that we know of. We know that for a fact. Plus this, sorry to steal the ghost thing, this ghost visit by Weber.
Right.
It's like, well, how can that happen? It's like, look, for people who don't understand, Chief Weber gave 30 years in the same position. He is the king of the castle in Wauwatosa, which is the affluent white suburban town right next to Milwaukee that everyone's afraid of. And imagine how many district attorneys that man has waited out, how many medical examiners he's waited out, how many mayors and elected officials that man has waited out, how many captains and lieutenants in his own department that man has waited out in 30 years.
Right.
That's how you're able to walk in
And
without signing.
without signing anything.
Because you are the king on the castle.
Right.
Chief, Milwaukee police chief. You know, we had the whole thing with Alfonso Morales kind of cutting it short, you know, getting demoted and everything. But even looking back to Chief Ed Flynn, we don't have these long stints. Like, it's not like super short in Milwaukee, but you don't have one guy sitting on the throne, holding the crown for
Right.
30 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's,
There's a lot with it. Even grabbing Anderson's gun that night. There's no documentation initially of bullets even being in the gun. All we know is that the gun is cleared. What does that mean? Did you look and there were no bullets? Did you just clear a chamber? What are we doing here? But then later on in the investigation, now all of a sudden we have bullets. Now we have one chamber.
similar to what they with Alvin Cole. Initially there's the question as to like Kimberly Mountain like look, if someone was intending to shoot officers as the way as they Cole was trying to do, then why would you try to shoot a gun in the magazine only one in the chamber? You know, like
Right.
Things like that. And then later Chief Weber comes out and says, no, there's like an extended clip. It's almost like things designed to scare white people in the suburbs.
Right. They cover their own asses when it comes to WPD, where it's like, and this has been kind of widely sort of mentioned with the John Doe hearing and some of the articles that have been written in press conferences and whatever. Like, this wasn't an actual investigation done by Wauwatosa Police Department or the district attorney's office. This is nothing more than justification to shoot, 3 individuals in a 5-year period.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
He's the only one actually killing one too.
right, which was another statement that he made, especially on the Dan O'Donnell show, where we've looked at the transcript from that show, where he's saying, well, I don't understand. What's the big deal? This is crazy. There's so many other officers in my department that have had far worse situations than me and fired their gun more than me, which he's fired 19 times in 3 different shootings. And looking back from 2010 to 2020.
He's a young officer. He's not a veteran officer.
Right. And you're right. And it's just like you are just consistently having these ridiculous stories, ridiculous statements. But it's almost like Wauwatosa, I'm going to throw this out there because I'm not afraid to say it, but it's almost like where Wauwatosa says, you know what, we're going to take black vigilante cop to go murder black and brown people within our city. As long as the white police aren't doing it, it's fine. We'll get away with it, and then we're going to protect you. Mm-hmm. And we'll cover the shit up later. You know what I mean? And it's almost what it really seems like as we're getting more documents, as we're releasing more things, as you have powerful people like Kimberly Motley that are taking these things into courtrooms now, and this stuff is becoming more public, where we're not being told any of these things in any of these shootings that are happening around the country. And it's like even with this John Doe hearing that's happening, where it's like, I think, and let me know where you're at, but this is almost where these shootings should be evaluated, is inside of these courtrooms and not by a neighboring department coming in. You know what I mean? You take all the evidence, hand it to the judge and say, look, here's what's going on. Here's the stuff. And then have a judge, yes, there's probable cause. There's not. This justified. I think I'd feel a little more comfortable seeing like what I'm seeing right now in this John Doe J. Anderson hearing, where I think I'd feel a little bit more comfortable knowing
And, the district attorney John Chisholm has mentioned to me that he would prefer if the district attorney didn't have the final call,
Right.
in these decisions. Just for context, or especially viewers that are outside the state of Wisconsin, in Wisconsin we have a pretty unique law where it's on in state law that police departments for officer involved shootings, they cannot investigate themselves. They have to have an outside agency lead the investigation and conduct the investigation. For a long time, that meant the state Department of Justice coming down and taking over that investigation. But in Milwaukee, it took a couple years, a year or so after the law was passed, the Michael Bell law, which was pretty unique and pretty historic in comparison to the nation. In Milwaukee, they figured out an alternative system over time where they have something called the Milwaukee. It started out as the the Milwaukee Suburban Investigative Team, and then it changed its name to the Milwaukee Area Investigative Team. It's had a couple of name changes. And what it is you can't even call it a unit. It's more like a network of detectives and investigators in the area from different departments. And what happens is if Tosa has a police shooting, Milwaukee investigates, leads that investigation. If Milwaukee has a shooting, some Tosa will investigate, or some other suburban department will investigate.
Right.
So they found a way to kind of like pass off these investigations to one another between different departments, while also having interdepartment relationships. Joseph Mensa is married to a Milwaukee PD officer.
Right.
That beyond like just mutual aid agreements and things like that. So you have these officers and these detectives and et cetera who are supposed to lead these supposed impartial investigations against other officers, but it doesn't really turn out that way. Just like what Kimberly Motley said, it seems like a lot of the times they're trying to figure out a way to justify it. Not just what they do on the scene, but when they talk to these families, they're trying to figure out, did he sell drugs? And not just Jay Anderson, with all of them.
Right.
Did he sell drugs? Why did he have pot? As if, look, I get in Wisconsin we're kind of weird, we're every single U.S. state plus an international neighbor has legalized cannabis in some way, shape, or form, but we don't. So I understand in some circles in Wisconsin that's fucking weird for I don't know why, but whatever. Did he smoke weed? Could that made him violent? Why did he have a gun? Ignoring the fact that in some other circumstances you never question why the person had a gun or not.
Right.
It's like you're trying to, instead of informing them, hey, there was a shooting and etc. We're sorry. We have to inform you and we have to ask you a couple questions. They're trying to criminalize a dead person
Immediately.
Right. There's a lot of transparency issues with the Milwaukee Area Investigative Team because of the way it's kind of unconventionally structured. It essentially takes its orders or reports to a committee or a commission, or I believe it's a committee, like a chiefs committee, which is like different police chiefs in the area, and I don't want to call it a cabal or something, but it's like this organization of police chiefs. We don't elect them, we don't appoint them, and they're calling the shots on these investigations,
Right.
or calling the shots on this team which conducts these investigations, and they give them an annual report that we never see. You don't even know where to send an open records request because there is no department for the investigative unit. It's like this, it's strange.
Right.
And with Wauwatosa, with Jay Anderson, for example, you have this situation where the police officers, John Chisholm says, the police officers, the involved agency has to freeze the scene, quote unquote. They're the first ones on the scene. They're involved. They have to freeze the scene. They're not supposed to touch anything. They're not supposed to talk to anyone, but they're supposed to freeze and preserve the scene and the witnesses.
Right.
Jay Anderson was killed at 3:00 in the morning, in a dark park where most people were going to be asleep. So, them taking the gun out of the car especially shouldn't have been done. At all. They should have left that evidence for Milwaukee PD, so there were no pictures of it taken on the scene.
Right. There's no picture whatsoever with that gun sitting on the passenger seat, so we know the positioning of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right.
you have more emails where these officers with the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, these MPD officers investigating, are kind of letting Tosa PD know like at different points in the investigation. Hey,
What's going on?
This is what I talked to Chisholm about.
Right.
You have other parts where they're talking about how to deflect media scrutiny onto so. Tulsa PD did the shooting, but Milwaukee PD will take the media scrutiny because they're investigating and they're organizing these things.
Right.
You have freezing the scene is one thing, and we can debate that. But freezing the scene is one thing. There's logistical realities to this, I understand. But why are Tulsa PD going back 4 days later, collecting not even collecting witness statements, making contact with people, and then writing in the report they didn't see anything? So what? So Milwaukee PD is not going to go, what if that person actually did see something?
Right.
And the Tulsa PD is just saying, oh, there's nothing there, so now Milwaukee PD isn't going to follow up. So how the system works is Milwaukee PD investigates in this frankly compromised kind of way. They gather the evidence, they create an investigative file, and then they send that to the district attorney, who then makes his decision his decision based off of that investigative file and that evidence that those cops have compiled, which is tainted.
Right.
And that's kind of the system we have here. And the John Doe case really showed on a deeper level how compromised that kind of system is, and it makes you wonder because over time the Milwaukee area investigative team they're handling in custody death investigations. They're handling more than just police shooting investigations.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, what is the purpose of this unit? Because it's not like Chisholm controls this unit, or that they report to him.
Right.
They're going behind his back having conversations with, the Tulsa PD. And the last thing I'll say on it is that with the Jay Anderson shooting, all cops, when they shoot someone, they're supposed to be placed on administrative leave or duty. Joseph Mensah was placed on a desk job in the detective bureau of Tulsa PD while the case for Anderson was being investigated, meaning that he would have been in shoulder length distance with the guys who were going out taking witness statements 4 days after the fact.
Right.
I hope that makes sense to people out there, and if it doesn't, maybe you're smarter than you think, because it shouldn't really make sense. But
yeah, it's just it's too much. I definitely believe that Tosa is extremely compromised when it comes to this, and I think it's important that Kim Motley is bringing all of this to light so that people can see this. And that's the thing too, where it's like people, when you have groups like TPR and they're all consistently marching, and you've got communities that are like, well, these marches don't do anything. Well, they do. They've brought attention, especially to these 3 shootings, but other shootings that have happened too.
We have 2 police chiefs that aren't police chiefs anymore since the protests began. We got Kenosha PD on camera kind of helping out militia people. We got body cameras for Tulsa PD. Milwaukee PD dropped all their curfew tickets. Like, these are tangible policy changes and effects which have happened, which sometimes the protesters forget.
Right.
They even have to be reminded sometimes, like, no, you are actually having an impact.
Right. Yeah. There's so much. There's actually so much change that has happened. And it's unfortunately at the expense of individuals,
People's lives.
You have people getting injured. You have people with fake arrests. A lot of.
Yeah, and I'll tell Chief Weber, look, on the one hand, especially during the curfew, I understand that, on October 7th, and that was the only day where property damage happened. There was no burning. There was no nothing. People threw rocks through some windows. And that's a problem. But that's also, when you think about, people in Wauwatosa were complaining about, in terms of the protests, loud music. Sometimes they throw toilet paper. They block roads for 5 minutes, like these really minor inconveniences. And then when October 7th happened, there's rocks through windows. That's something your kids do. Your Wauwatosa, that's something your kids do. They throw rocks. I went to high school in Tosa. They throw rocks through windows. The Palm Squad TPs the football players' houses at the beginning of the football season every year. And when that's done, that's cute.
Right.
Okay, but when protesters or people in a protest
are TPing
or something, and the scale of the property damage was not at all. They're talking about Kenosha, and we're worried about Kenosha. We're worried about Louisville, across the country.
Right.
And there is nothing comparable to that happened in Wauwatosa, and that only happened during the first day. The rest of the days were spent Tosa PD hunting protesters through the streets like Game and ACLU and journalists, Chief Weber. I was shot at by your officers myself during those days.
Right. Yeah, and we
And
released
I mean
a lot
shot
of
at, you
right.
know?
We released a lot of body cam footage from Tosa, from Greenfield, Glendale, all these different places of those officers that were in Tosa, and they had their body cameras on, and they're laughing. They're talking about I can't wait till this vehicle crashes into something. Um, let's go deflate their tires now. Talking about picking off a random protester, essentially to like set this example and put this fear out there.
The fear of God.
Right, right. There's a lot of stuff that that's where I wish like you have this other side. If we're kind of labeling, you have this other side that is not looking at the totality of the types of stuff that you and I are really looking at. We're really trying to uncover. We're trying to understand, for our own perspectives too. But we're trying to make sure, like, okay, we don't want to fit a narrative in here. We want to make sure that everybody, regardless of sides, regardless of political opinions, whatever it may be, look, people, this is the actual truth about what's actually happening out here. This is why we're releasing this stuff.
You can see the emails, you can see the footage.
Right.
You can see the police report.
Right.
I'm not making it up.
Right. It's it's not like we're sitting here right now today just randomly.
It actually
BSing.
is that bad. Like, yeah, they actually did put the mayor on a high value target list. And
Right.
no, they weren't trying to protect him. They were. That's not something you protect, a high value target.
Right. Right.
And even if it is the bullet points underneath that PowerPoint, they weren't protecting him. And it's. It's really important, like that's the service of journalism. Journalism is a kind of public service. It's important to get people information. Information should be free, and right now you have, especially, there's a lot of things that we can show by being on the ground, getting shot at, dodging fireworks and bombs and stuff. But open records and documents and intel and that kind of stuff, that is almost where the rubber really meets the road, and people have to understand that not only is it within your right to request this information, not just us, but normal people, but I'm sorry, my moment to say it, the man oftentimes doesn't want you to get those documents.
Right.
We had the police union president of Wauwatosa in 2016 when discussing having to release Joseph Mensa's employee file. Look, why don't we consider raising the prices? That's what other departments are doing. I just talked to I just talked to the police union attorney about it. Not the city attorney, the police union attorney. There is contempt for transparency within some police departments. And sometimes it's not contempt. Sometimes I think maybe it's a lack of appreciation. When the pandemic happened, Chief Alfonso Morales of the Milwaukee Police Department, he kind of deemed the open records section as non-essential because they were trying to put cops on the street in case cops got sick. I get it in the moment, but now we have a giant backup where they are not fulfilling basic open records, what should be basic open records requests for a year or more. And frankly, at this point, it doesn't feel like it's because they don't have the people. It feels like they don't want to release the information.
Yeah, and I agree. And then that's where what I'm dealing with too. And I won't say some of these on this platform, but certain departments where I'm blatantly being ignored. I've been denied, which doesn't make sense according to FOIA laws. The actual denial reasons, or they tell me that I've never actually filed an open records request pertaining to whatever types of things I'm looking for. And that's where, it comes where, okay, this information needs to be out there. I want to review this information. And if this is of public interest, then the public deserves the right to see all of these things. So because these departments are hiding this massive transparency between them and public, where I'm in a position now where I'm forced as a media company to now start filing lawsuits against these departments, which is money, which is time, just to get access to a record or a group of records that I legally am allowed to have anyway. You know what I mean? And now I need a judge to tell some government body, give him the records. And it's just like...
And then you go out and you report it, and then all a mainstream media news outlet, and I won't name names, but all they have to do is just call them up and be like, hey, give me what you gave Isaiah or give me what you gave Kevin. And they just get it in the email
Immediately.
quickly. They don't have to pay for it. They don't have to deal with threats. They don't have to deal with cars parking outside their houses.
Right.
They don't have to deal with money issues. They don't have to deal with suing, stupid games, weird phone calls. They don't have to deal with any of that stuff.
Right.
You know, because
Yeah, weird phone calls. I've already gotten my phone's been blowing up with the
Yeah.
private stalker numbers
Yeah, I've
since
been
we've been
seeing
sitting.
that.
Yeah,
I've been
but
seeing
that's
that.
but you're right. It's like when we now have to do these types of steps in order to get these documents, just so we can get it to the public, right? And like you're saying, you got weird phone calls. You got vehicles parked out of your house. You're being followed.
Yeah.
The mainstream media or the kind of institutional style media is, you had to pay $500 to get all these types of documents. Now mainstream media is just like, well, yeah, just give us the stuff.
Yeah.
Or I can come up behind you even and be like, hey, you gave this to Isaiah with Wisconsin Examiner, give me the same shit. And it's like, but I got it for free. You had to pay $500. You know what I mean? Or
And
there's
then-
like weird things where it's like, hey, we can email this document to you, but now you got to come in and pick up a disc that's going to cost you money. And it's like, well, why? You're putting documents on the disc. You emailed me documents for no reason.
How come I have to come in and show my face,
Yeah.
and give and have you harass me to give me my ID when that's illegal? I don't have to give you ID to get an open records request. That's in the law, and
Right.
then when I download these files, they're corrupt. Like, well, why are they corrupt?
Yeah,
like
there's-
what do you, man? This is stupid. This is just stupid, and and then on top of all of that, then they do things which I had never seen anyone do, like the confidential informant thing, where on top of all of that, then they release it, and they burn their own confidential informants. That was done for no other purpose other than to make the Milwaukee activist community not trust one another, because now no one knows who to trust.
Who's who? Right.
No one knows who's who.
Right.
No one knows who said what. And no one knows why these people, after they said that, kept coming around, talking to people.
Right.
Going over people's houses and stuff. Like, and you promised you promised these people to be confidential informants, and you didn't lie to them. You treated them as confidential. You're briefing other officers and feds, calling them confidential informants.
Right.
And
you
then
screw up.
Yeah, and then you release them. You don't blur their footage. You don't hide their information. You don't redact their names. Okay. On top of that, some of these people are giving information that they have like people's addresses and stuff. They have no idea how they could have gotten that. Like, so there's in the reports, not video, but like when they're interviewing certain people they interviewed, they have in the report. So yeah, we put him in the blacked out car and he led us right to where XYZ lived. There's no way he could have known that. So now you have to wonder, how did they find out that information? And that's just that deeper look. When you're looking at, I'm not going to say the guy's name, but when you look at the confidential informant that they burned, that is dangerous. If you really, this is how the investigation is compromised. Like, if you really believe these people, People's Revolution protesters, are so violent, so dangerous,
Right.
so
and they've
organized.
even been labeled domestic terrorists at
Yeah.
this point by Tosa.
At this point, and you can see in some of these documents that those words, the T word is invoked,
Right.
and it's just,
But if they are that dangerous,
why are you burning your confidential informants?
right, and you put that person, and this is not just with this scenario, this is all across the country, where if these types of things happen, where you put that informant's life at risk, you know what I mean? Because obviously throughout history we've seen where informants are getting murdered later on down the road type thing, right? But yeah, it's like what you're saying. If TPR is this big giant terrorist group and they're gonna take over the country and blow up the world,
You're certainly not acting like they are.
right? So it's just like they'll do their kind of pretend thing, like we're gonna look cool with our technology up in 6 floors of hotels, but now we're gonna start burning all these witnesses, and it's just this department, something's wrong with this department, and it's just like
Who would ever trust them again? I had a high-level law enforcement official, I'm not going to say who, very high-level law enforcement official in the Milwaukee area tell me off the record, like, who would ever trust this department ever again?
right.
Who would ever trust this department ever again? Some of these things that they release, like the PowerPoints, these involve ongoing investigations. They weren't supposed to release these things. It's not redacted. Who would ever trust them again? And this demonstrates, and this is this official's words, this demonstrates like a siege mentality that they have, like an us versus them and we win, we always win mentality.
Right. Which is
On the part
dangerous.
of the police department, which is dangerous, and that's not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
once again, that's that official's words.
Right.
You know,
And you have a department now that has compromised so many things. You and I are looking at stuff, again, dating back 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And shit, we haven't even looked prior to that because just, Jesus, 20, 30 years worth of stuff is...
stuff that might not even be stories. We just know it now.
We just... Right. And it's like, if we can't trust a department that puts good officers in jeopardy for their safety... You know what I
Right.
mean? That puts just the department as a whole, and then cases, legitimate cases, where
Right.
we have to actually catch the bad guy, we have to prosecute the bad guy, and now we're bringing up all these compromised situations where Tosa could start losing legitimate cases now, where a bad guy actually needs to be behind bars for a lengthy period of time, and now we have defense attorneys that are using Wauwatosa can't be trusted. And that's dangerous. That's a problem.
What federal prosecutor would ever come near any of these cases? You know, like if you really want to try this stuff, you're trusting this department has burned you. You know, and it just really goes without words. It's hard to fathom just how deep it got, and it seems like maybe at some point. Maybe in that department some people are kind of looking back and kind of saying like, why did we go, like why is it that in some conference room somewhere no one said, hey, maybe this is a bad idea,
Right.
maybe we shouldn't put this in writing. Like even the fact that they're pointing all this out, these are emails. Do you not think that we can get these emails? This is open records requested material. You're talking about this out in the open because you never thought that you'd have to obey the law, maybe, that you could just jerk the open records request and you would
Right.
have to receive this stuff.
Right.
Who knows? You
And
know?
I'm finding stuff too, even with open records requests, where I'm talking to their like kind of media officer, their records officer, and finding out where this particular person's like, oh, I have to go talk to so and so. I don't have access to this, and it's like,
I've had that too.
well, why would you not have access to this?
Well, only the chief can have access to that. It's like, so the chief gets to look in his, like in my case, it was Chief Weber can only look in his own inbox.
Right.
And we have to charge you based off of his salary hourly to look at this inbox, and we can't guarantee when he's actually going to do it. And then he has to redact the stuff too. So he gets to choose what emails to give me, and then he gets to redact them too. And I have to pay $400 before he even does it.
Right. Yeah, right. And that's serious problem. Now we have to trust the chief, that the chief is giving us the stuff that we want to see, that the public needs to see, has a right to see. And so again, we have people, and when we go back to specifically Chief Weber, with what we're seeing, where he's covering things up, he's going into rooms that he shouldn't be in, off the books, and then we have to trust this man to give us documents that the community of Wauwatosa, needs to see. And we are seeing this. Kenosha has a very similar problem. We're seeing this with a group out in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit Will Breathe. They're having issues like Wauwatosa is having. That protester group, I would say, is very similar to a TPR type group. But this is not just Wauwatosa. This is happening everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, people, we live in a kind of a gilded age of digital, and I mean, my first experience with Tosa PD in terms of like covering something for them was being a 17-year-old kid making a documentary about misconduct they were doing at the time. And by the way, it's called Speak, Friend, and Enter. If you type in Wauwatosa Police documentary, I'm sure you'll find it on YouTube. You might have to go down a little bit in the search suggestions because they push it down, but you'll find it. That was made with a Sony Handycam and the YouTube video editor, which isn't available anymore, but it was free and crappy. But I figured out how to make it work, and I made a 2-hour feature-length documentary about it. There are kids out there, who can figure this stuff out. There's people like you and me who can figure out new methods to communicate and things like that. And there's a lot of stories in local communities that don't get covered because there's like an establishment media network that doesn't cover them or goes out and sends it to the editor, and it never makes it out of the editor's office for whatever the reason. You hear that all the time. I'm not going to say names, but you hear that all the time from these news network guys who may be sympathetic, but they tell you, I go out to your event, a protest event, I go out to your event, I film it, we do interviews, I take it to the editor, they don't want anything to do with it.
Right.
So it's like, it's really up to the people to kind of get involved in that kind of information flow. And the people, not just, the police too. I mean, I understand there's government contracts and confidentiality, but I mean, I'm going to, God damn it, like they like you are a public servant, and if there is something going on that, especially if it concerns illegal surveillance, powerful technologies that are supposed to be used for bugging a heroin dealer's phone, and I have friends who know friends who have died, and I have plenty of friends who have had to deal with addiction. That's just one issue. You're supposed to use that stuff to bug someone's phone for that kind of thing, and really you're not even supposed to use it for that. These things were originally designed for terrorism,
Right.
and now they're being used for street level crime, and now further they're being used to monitor people because why? You killed their family member and you're afraid of litigation, or you're afraid of civil unrest because people are protesting over it because you killed someone.
Right.
It's very people, I'm not advocating for leaks or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, if you have the right to, what's the word, like conscientious object, conscientious objector.
Yeah.
You have the right, and even though you go do real police work, don't volunteer to be part of the protest crew every time. Like, there are things that normal people can do. And the last thing I'll say about the normal people thing is, there are people in Wauwatosa who were describing bricks through windows as terrorism. How did we go from fake WMDs in Iraq? Yeah, I said it. Well, how did we go from fake WMDs in Iraq being terrorism? We're going to invade a country because that's terrorism, to bricks through windows in a suburban community is terrorism.
Right. Well, as long as you use that word and a brick through the window, it justifies law enforcement having their big giant military tanks and their really cool weapons.
I'm not saying the brick through the window is a good thing, but the brick through the window is not terrorism.
Right.
And
but as long as we say it is, then it justifies, well, we can buy all these really cool toys and make the urban areas, military combat zones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We became, you and me, we became, a lot of people became war correspondents in their own neighborhoods in 2020.
Right.
Because the cops wanted to go out and have fun, frankly, because they didn't have to do that. How come, how come on October 7th, how come if they were so overzealous with being so aggressive with the protesters, how come they allowed the protesters to march past them on 76th Street and continue towards Mayfair Mall? How come you didn't stop them then? How come you allowed them to throw the bricks?
Right.
How come you didn't pursue them after they threw the bricks?
Right.
Okay, because you let them go back into Milwaukee. You didn't pursue them. There were no drones. I was there.
Right.
Okay, so you let that happen, and then you lit them up the next day.
Right.
2 days.
Right.
Lit them up.
And that's the thing is the general public is only hearing protester, and protesters don't throw shit. They just don't, right?
No.
That's
those
that's
are honestly
verbiage
like
is,
agent provocateurs or something, because whenever someone throws something, you have 15 people saying, don't do that.
knock it off.
And
right.
then that person dips and runs away, and then the police start shooting, and it makes you wonder.
Right.
You know?
So like, it's like what you're saying is, why didn't law enforcement stop this when this happened? And this is the part where, like, I get so frustrated where it's like the general public, again, if we have to label and choose sides or whatever, you have one side that's so just focused on protester instead of, well, why did the police allow this? The police had an opportunity. And it's the same thing with Kenosha. Why did law enforcement push that group out of Civic Park? Civic Park was surrounded. Why did we push them down this thing? We released audio scanner with Kenosha where, KPD surrounds 125 to 150 armed, citizens, they call them, on the audio scanner. You surrounded every one of those militia that were stationed up, and then they vanished. You allowed them to go. So, which means then you pushed people out of Civic Park, down Sheridan Road. You allowed a situation to happen where you unfortunately have a Kyle Rittenhouse that is, even him, himself is put into a position. You know what I mean? You have a
Created
Joshua
by this whole
Zeminski,
thing.
right, and it's created by law enforcement. So you have the general public who's going, F protester, protester did this. But no, you had law enforcement that was there in all of these different scenarios across the country where they could have prevented. They chose not to. They chose to engage and agitate it even further.
The Capitol insurrection, even. It's like, look, how come there was dudes fully kitted out in minivans ready to make people disappear in Wauwatosa in the night? Think
Right.
about that.
Right.
Like, vanish and abducted, basically.
Yeah.
And you don't know who these people are, fully kitted out. How come that was in Tosa, but there was nothing for the Capitol, for the U.S. Capitol
Right.
situation?
Where's those blacked out SUVs with these, who knows who these people are?
Who knows who these people, those blacked out cars with the camera? You're like, what is that? Who are you? Who do
Right.
you work for?
Right. Nobody
And
identifies themselves. You have no idea. We have
you got departments. You film a department there, and then you follow up with paperwork, and they say we weren't there.
we weren't there. Right. So it's like, well, what is going on? It's all these very covert, operations. There's no accountability. The general public is not being told what is actually happening
They're not even being told the capabilities of some of these
of
technologies.
some of the stuff, right? And that's why, like, even with the automatic license plate readers that we did the article on with Kenosha, there were so many people that bought into the rhetoric of these things are great, this is what they do, and they're proven to not work. And even the ACLU, who is far more advanced than I am, has been diving into these things for years and years. There's communities now where this information has gotten out, and these communities are saying, well, no. We were on board with this because you lied to us. Now we know what's going on. No, we don't want this stuff here, and these things are going bye-bye. But it's like it's exactly what you're saying, where it's law enforcement had opportunities to prevent a damage, prevent why did they get past this road? You know what I mean? All this stuff, and the general public is just not. They're shifting the blame away from where. Maybe blame's the wrong word, but accountability really needs to be taken.
Yeah, exactly, and especially in regards to just a police shooting game, even with Joseph Mensa and Jay Anderson Jr. When Joseph Mensa was on the radio, he's talking about how when we shoot someone, it's an act of God whether or not they survive or not. You know?
Right.
And it's like, look, you are supposed to be a professional. That doesn't sound like something a professional would say. A professional doesn't just shoot their gun and hope for the best.
Right.
A professional
Right.
knows what they're doing. And the same thing with these civil unrest actions. In Kenosha, there was a lot of things happening, and still it felt like there was more of a defensive posture with the with what some of the police were doing, particularly in Civic Park.
Yeah.
But in Wauwatosa, it was extremely proactive, extremely aggressive to the point of malice, of wanting to hurt people.
Right.
Shooting someone until they're on the ground, throwing gas on top of them, and then when someone comes to throw it away and help them up to get away, because you want them to leave anyways, right? They're trying to leave.
Right.
And then you trap them and you kettle them in and you don't let them leave, and you're dropping them off in random locations in the city and then saying later that you didn't do it. This doesn't sound like a professional kind of thing. This sounds like what you say, like a gang, or some sort of dark paramilitary force. And there are solutions to some of these issues. Like there are civilian accountability boards. There are committees that oversee surveillance technologies in some other parts of the country. Why don't we have that here? It's not like Milwaukee PD has unsophisticated technologies. We have, especially some of our some of our surveillance capabilities in the state are and the way it's kind of centralized is far in advance than some other states. In a lot of states, with surveillance, there's more of a distance kind of intel gathering aspect to it. In Milwaukee, they are putting people on the ground.
Yeah.
And it doing these kinds of covert things, and this is where the public comes in. People need to, and they are organizing, but there are solutions to these things. There are ways to bring this more into accountability, and there's also language to be used or not used. People in the suburbs especially who have the privilege, and that's what it is, to drive on smooth roads without potholes, to not hear gunshots, to not have to deal with the scenes of poverty that you don't like seeing so much.
Right.
You have a especially have a responsibility to not use the word terrorism when it is not needed. And all Americans have a deep, deep responsibility to not use that word when it is not needed and to not overapply that word. Because when we call something terrorism as Americans, when we call something terrorism today, it results in it results in loss of life and loss of civil liberties for someone else tomorrow. And that may not be you. They may not look like you. They may not be from your neighborhood, but it matters because one day it will be you. Right. That's what happened when we were in high school in a Wauwatosa. It didn't matter anymore if you were black or brown. They were stopping white kids. If you looked like you were a hippie, or if you looked like you smoked pot or whatever it is, you were getting treated just like the people who shouldn't cross 60th Street.
Right. That's what people don't understand is what's happening today to one will eventually happen to the other group.
It will eventually happen to you. You can't just stand idly by while people have to deal with those things, because it will be you someday. It really will, and it'll be scary. And when it is you, there will be no one to help you.
Right, and you want me to come out and film you now? Your rights are being violated, and that's what my platform is. You want me to come now?
Right.
You didn't help. You didn't care when we were doing, black and brown communities and indigenous people. You didn't care.
You liked it even.
Yeah, you were all about, burn these people, arrest these people.
Run them down in the street.
Run them down in the streets. They're trying to pass laws you can legally run protesters over now. Yeah.
But you're all about freedom, though.
Right.
You're all about freedom, though.
You pick and choose whose rights we're gonna protect.
You're all about freedom, though.
Yeah.
Especially.
I always get the ones where they come on and they're like, oh, so you're so big on civil rights, civil liberties. If a Nazi was out here, and they were trying to suppress his speech, would you protect his speech? Yes.
Yeah.
I would. I wouldn't like what he said, but same as I don't like what you just said. But I would absolutely 100% try to help elevate, because his right to say the shit that we don't like hearing, 100% he has a right to say it.
Yeah.
And if he has a right to say it, then the protester, the black, brown, or indigenous protester, absolutely has their right to voice their opinions, same as all these so-called patriots have a right to express their stuff. We can't just start suppressing people's stuff because, again, we didn't like how they said it, what they said, whatever. People fortunately have a right to say certain things, but it's like, we can't pick and choose what we're protecting. And
right. It's
freedoms and records.
It's like people can be racist, and that's a First Amendment protected activity. That's what the Police and Fire Commission ruled with the Wauwatosa Martin Luther King Day parties. Yeah, they're racist. That's First Amendment protected freedom of speech activity. We can't fire them for that. Oh, but people can't march in the streets, though.
Right.
So people can wear blackface and go to Martin Luther King Day parties and be racist and use it as a tool to sniff out possible snitches like amongst your ranks, or who wouldn't be with the boys on certain stuff. So they can do that, and that's okay. On duty, they can do that. No problem.
Right.
But people can't march in the streets, though, and play music.
Right.
Because it bothers you.
Right.
People have a deep responsibility, in these kinds of things, and to talk about the issues, have honest discussions about the issues, and also to not you. I got so tired of hearing people call bricks through windows terrorism when I was in Kenosha, and I saw some stuff, and you saw some stuff too in Kenosha, and that was nothing compared to what happened in Wauwatosa. Right. I saw destruction in Kenosha. I saw people in Wauwatosa getting shot at as they ran away. I saw ACLU getting scooped up. We weren't sure, and that's okay, because the police came down 4 days before a decision by the DA and said you should be afraid.
Right.
You should, it's.
And that's a great thing that you just said there. You should be afraid, and that's the type of thing that some of the cities, the Common Council members, the police departments, Police and Fire Commission, that's the stuff that they're doing to the communities, in using these terrorism words, using these fear tactics, to get the community on board to be behind them, which allows them then for them themselves to actually terrorize people, cover it up later on, and nobody's asking questions because we protected you from this fake fear.
Yeah.
You know.
Let us do whatever we want. The police can't be, a hammer in the dark out there looking for nails, building up its capacity. That's how we've gotten where we are now, where police aren't really police anymore. They're like goons backed by like NSA type capabilities whenever they want to deploy it.
Yeah.
And these are your taxpayers, people. These are your taxpayer dollars. And once again, just because you're not getting stopped, just because you're not getting surveilled, doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It definitely matters, especially if you claim to be all about freedom. It matters, people. It really does.
Facts.
This thing is this stuff is real, and it's scary a lot of the time. It's not. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah. What do you think there, Raw Topic?
Well,
How are you
guys? You guys pretty much took over the show there, so I really did not have to do much as far as getting the topics going. I think we covered all the topics
Yeah,
that
I
we
think so.
said we were going to cover. I think this was a great discussion. A lot of people has commented that it was a good discussion. And I think that, we should come back and with another discussion when we got some more things going on.
Yeah.
And do this again. We should even probably think about a panel and get some more people involved.
I'd be about it.
People on the blue side, people on the Black Lives Matter side, and try to get ideas of why are the sides so different. I don't know. I think we should get into a deep conversation like that pretty soon.
If we can find them, that other side doesn't like to talk.
Yeah,
Whether
it's
Yeah.
hard to find that other
enforcement
side, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
especially-
somebody.
or at least normal. Some of them are like, "Oh yeah, I'll talk to you," and then they're like weird.
Really lactose
Yeah.
or something.
Something's up.
Yeah, let's get some. That would
yeah,
be cool,
hell
like
yeah.
a panel
But
discussion.
yeah, we should definitely, because this was a good conversation. People enjoyed it. I think we should get deeper next time on some other topics that is devastating the world today. Do you guys have any links you want to drop? Do you have a page, Isaiah, you want to
Yeah.
drop, and then you drop your
They know me. they know where to find.
Never Stop Media on Facebook, Never Stop Voices on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And then in the streets, and then when they stalk me, they know. I don't have to tell them. They know.
Yeah, people know me too at this point. I can't. In the beginning of the protests, I could kind of covertly come in and out, and now I'm like, "Hey, Isaiah, how's it going?" I was like, "Hey, I don't know you." But
Isn't
hi."
that weird when they do? It's like I don't know. Do I
Don't
need
stop
to
doing it though, because you guys are all beautiful and awesome. I
Right.
just don't know all of you.
Right. It's like weird though. You don't know. Like, do I fear you when you say hi to me? Do
Right.
I like?
Are you an informant?
Like, what do we?
What do you want?
What do we? Right. Why are you talking to me?
Are
Like,
you
what?
why are you talking to me?
Right.
How do you know who I am?
Right. That's why, like, you should. Him and I both, bro. Like, we're just so quiet when we're out there, and it's like, I think even in the beginning, talking to each other, it was just
Real
kind of like,
suspicious of each other.
yeah, like we both knew we're journalists, but it's
where'd
like
you guys? What pro event did you meet? Or?
some TPR.
Probably saw you first at Kenosha, maybe.
Probably, yeah. Probably
I started seeing
probably
you.
Kenosha.
Yeah, because I
Okay.
started seeing you around because there was like live streamers around and everything, and some of them we're not going to name names. Some of them were informants and sketch. So I'm kind of like I remember one day I think I was filling you out, but like there's a certain vibe that. There's different kinds of journalists. There's like those TV journalists that come out of college and preppy and everything. They just carry themselves a certain way. And
Right.
then there's independent journalists, people who've like seen real stuff and come out of the grid and everything. I feel like that's kind of like where our backgrounds are. So I sensed that off of you. So I'm like, okay, he's most likely legit. And then I talked to other people like, okay, he's legit.
Right.
This other person is not.
Right.
So yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But go ahead, drop your shit.
yeah,
Tell 'em where to
tags,
get you.
man. Tags. I got Wisconsin Examiners on YouTube. Wisconsin Examiner has a website as well. We have high quality news articles every day, commentary, etc. I'm on Twitter. Should just be able to type in Isaiah Holmes, ISIAH, HOLMES. Search the same thing on YouTube. You'll find an alternative YouTube channel. And check out the Wauwatosa police documentary that I made 5 years ago, Speak, Friend, and Enter, on YouTube. And more work will be coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
For sure, it was a pleasure having you. I'm glad you came in. This is like one of the first I've been off camera.
See, this is where we need to like we need to make a company.
I'm always down for that.
We
You
need
know
to
that.
we need to have an investigative team of people and make this shit big.
Semi-decentralized.
And then you have like killer ass investigative team. Have all your little news people that, do their whatever news, but you just have the investigative team that's really looking into some serious shit.
Yeah.
We need to figure out people. We need lots of money.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how we can get you and I building a giant company with some serious investigative journalists, and then we'll maybe
Looks like it's time to-
employ the streamer over here.
Right.
Looks like it's time to start a GoFundMe page then, huh?
Something like
Something.
that.
Get some funds flowing in to get
Something.
to bring the real content.
You know how
of
much damage
the
we
next
could do?
generation.
I think
Of,
Legit, like me and you together.
I think we've already done a lot.
We have done a lot.
But yeah.
We have. But it's like we're like working together, but individually
Yeah.
on the same goal type
Exactly.
of thing. Whereas if we had me and you and two other people that were insane like us,
Right.
bro,
Different
we
areas.
could crush
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of area just not being crushed because people aren't trying.
because they're
It
right.
seems like we're crushing, but because we are. But if other people tried harder,
Right.
like, I'm not going to name names. Mainstream media tried harder. It wouldn't seem like we're crushing.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah,
but
exactly.
we are because that's how bad the media plane is.
True.
And you guys, let's wrap this up. I want to thank you guys again for watching this 2+ hour live stream. Probably the longest stream I've ever done on Raw Topic. But I couldn't stop these guys from going. So
That's a Rogan podcast right there.
you guys know where to find Raw Topic. We're Raw Topic Live on YouTube. We are Raw Topic on Facebook. We're on Periscope, Twitter. We're on Twitch. So you can find us at a lot of platforms. And remember, you guys, if you can't come real, then at least come raw. Raw Topic. Peace out, you guys.
Perfect.